Prajumna was a brahmachari, and he had opened a center in Columbus, Ohio. And I started to go to the temple, and very shortly Srila Prabhupada would be arriving in Columbus, and also Allen Ginsberg. So Prajumna said, why don't you write a letter to Srila Prabhupada? And I was a Christian, but still interested in Eastern philosophy, so I wrote a letter, and Srila Prabhupada wrote a very nice letter back about, I don't ask you to give up your love for your religion, but if you add chanting Hare Krishna, surely your love of God will increase. So I started chanting, and I read the Bhagavad Gita, which was basically the main book that we had. And that really convinced me that Krishna was God, and I was so excited to know Srila Prabhupada was coming to Columbus. So Srila Prabhupada came, and some devotees came from New York, and there was also Kirtananda Harigriva came up from New Vrindavana, and Narayan came. He made an altar at the last minute, and a Vyasasana that was just like a box, really, with a pillow on top. And Srila Prabhupada came to Columbus, and it was just, it was wonderful. So Devananda was his servant, and he came up to me one day and said, I hear that you want to get initiated. And I was kind of afraid to ask, didn't really know if I would be accepted, and I'd only been a devotee a short while. And he said, why don't you ask Srila Prabhupada, he's in this room. So I knocked on the door and went in and paid my obeisances and said, Srila Prabhupada, can I get initiated? And he said, I think that would be all right. And I was initiated just a few days after that. Just being in the room with Srila Prabhupada was just like being in the spiritual world. It was so wonderful. I like to just kind of be in the background. I didn't really talk to him too much. I just like to watch him interact with other people and pass out the fruit. And it was just like going from night to day, being around him. All of a sudden, everything became so auspicious. One time, they wanted me to wash Srila Prabhupada's clothes, and I took his clothes, and they looked perfect. There was no dirt. And they smelled really good, but I washed them anyway. And then what was happening was, the big thing that was happening was Allen Ginsberg was coming to Columbus, and we put posters up on campus with a picture of Srila Prabhupada and Allen Ginsberg. And most people came because they knew about Allen Ginsberg. There must have been around 2,000 students that came to Hitchcock Hall, and it was really packed. And Srila Prabhupada was up on the stage, and the devotees were all around Srila Prabhupada. And I remember I was going to be initiated in about 2 days, and I was sitting over on the side, just looking at him and just praying very intensely to please help me, Srila Prabhupada, please help me to become a devotee. I'm going to get initiated. And a very mystical experience happened. Srila Prabhupada, all of a sudden, he looked over at me, and when his glance hit me, my whole consciousness completely changed. I don't know how long this lasted, but everything became very intensified. I just looked out and saw a sea of people, and Srila Prabhupada looked so effulgent, and I really understood he only came here to take us back to Godhead. This was such a hellish place, and it was such an austerity for him to even come here. And it was almost like I forgot about my own existence, and it was, then we had a kirtan, and these students didn't know the Hare Krishna mantra, but they gradually caught on, and they started chanting. And it became more and more ecstatic, and to the point where the students were actually standing on the chairs, jumping up and down, coming up on the stage. It was just an ecstatic kirtan. I felt like Srila Prabhupada just opened the storehouse of love of God, and everyone was getting this incredible experience. And then Srila Prabhupada actually stood up on this Vyasasan, and he was dancing, bending his knees up and down, and taking some flowers from his garland and throwing them, and people were trying to catch them. And everyone was just chanting really loud, and I had just had this experience with Prabhupada looking at me, and I felt like Krishna is here. It was so intense, I almost passed out, literally. It was just the most incredible experience. And I remember Allen Ginsberg taking his microphone and saying, "I've never seen so many people jumping out of their skins before." It was just like Srila Prabhupada was giving everyone a taste of the holy name. I felt like in the early days that maybe to get things going, he was really letting the devotees have these transcendental experiences, even though not being qualified in any way. One time we were having the kirtan in the temple, and after the Jayam prayer, Srila Prabhupada would walk out at that time, and I was paying my obeisances, and Srila Prabhupada came up, and he bent down and he touched me on the back, just like that, and his lotus foot kind of kicked me a little bit. He was very kind. He was very, very kind. I got initiated. Srila Prabhupada at that time did the fire ceremony because he was the only one that was doing it at that time. And being around Srila Prabhupada, I felt very open and very, just like I didn't want to hold anything back from him. I really at that time was just wanting to surrender. It made me very emotional, and I was crying a lot. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that he said, "She cries very easily, be kind to her." He was very, very kind. And Srila Prabhupada also, from Columbus, went to New Vrindavan for the very first time. There was only 2 carloads of devotees, and I was really lucky to be in the 2nd carload. I was waiting to leave, all packed and everything, and Jai Gopal had just become the new temple president. He came out and said, "You can't go because Srila Prabhupada only wants single men and householders in New Vrindavan, no single women." I was so upset. I got out of the car, and this Indian lady named Rekha saw I was really upset. She went up and told Srila Prabhupada what was happening, and Srila Prabhupada said, "She can come and she can stay as long as I'm there and then go to another temple." So I was really happy. I went back in the car, and Kirtananda was driving Srila Prabhupada, and he was going very, very fast. We could not keep up with him. This was Srila Prabhupada's very first trip to New Vrindavan. So we got there later. It was Labangotika, I think Rishikesh, Narnarayan, myself. And there was not a road going up to the old farm. There was barely a path. There was some smashed down grass. And we were walking. I was thinking, when are we ever going to get there? And finally, we did. It was later in May, and it was really just perfect wet weather, and we got there, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting outside with the devotees around him, taking Satyabhama and Parmananda were living in a refurbished chicken coop, and they came out with some prasadam. After the long trip and the hike up the hill, I was really, really hungry, but we were sitting scattered around. So when she came around with seconds, they accidentally skipped over me, and I just couldn't talk in front of Srila Prabhupada. I had so much awe and reverence for him. But I really wanted more prasadam. And I was just thinking, I wish I had more. And right then, Srila Prabhupada looked right up at me and said, "Oh, you want more?" And I was so shocked, I went like this. And then I thought, oh no, he knows everything I'm thinking. And I was really, for about 2 days, completely paranoid, because every time I saw Srila Prabhupada, I'd say, well, don't think, and I'd think of a cuss word or something, and then I'd get really embarrassed. And I was a new devotee, I was trying to control my mind, and I thought, oh no, he knows everything I'm thinking. I'm so embarrassed. So Srila Prabhupada understood what was going on, and he came out of his way one day. He was walking, came out of his way, came over to where I was sitting on the grass, and he just looked at me with a big smile. He said, "It is all right." And I could kind of relaxed at that point. Being around him was just so ecstatic. My main service was washing pots, and New Vrindavana at that time, we didn't have running water, so we get cold water from the well, and there was a big wooden platform, and I'd scrub the pots, never knowing when Srila Prabhupada would go by. And different times he would come up and say something, like one time he came up and he said, "Chintamani, that means place where Krishna stays." He said, "Therefore, prepare in your heart a place for Krishna." He said, "Is that all right?" And it was just so exciting, anything he said. So I tried to scrub the pots as good as I could and pick flowers in the woods, make garlands. So we had different services. The women were sleeping in the barn. Chintamani Dasi, Bhagavatika, and I were sleeping in the barn. They had just gotten the first cow, Kaliya. And Srila Prabhupada said Kaliya was crying because they'd taken her calf away. And another time, some cows escaped from a farm, it could have been the Snyder's farm, where they were killing the cows, and about 3 or 4 of them, and they came right up and they were just standing right under the house where Srila Prabhupada was, like sensing protection. It was really sad because we had to send them back. And then Srila Prabhupada was staying upstairs. He had, there was a mattress in the corner where he slept on. There was 2 black trunks, the ones from India, that were like a desk. He had a picture of Bhaktisiddhanta on the desk. Then there was a little room with Radha Krishna deities, and I got to clean, sweep and mop the room every day when he'd go out for a walk, and then I would be out of there before he came back. So one day I was sweeping, and Srila Prabhupada came up early, and I was really nervous. He was sitting chanting japa on the mattress, just watching me sweep the floor. And I thought, I've really got to sweep this floor really good to get all the dirt. And I was taking too long. It was the only time he yelled at me a little bit. And he said, "What are you messing around for? Why don't you use a dustpan?" Well, I thought that was the end of the world, that I couldn't even sweep the floor right. I was just trying so hard, and tears were coming down my face. And I ran downstairs, I grabbed the dustpan, I'm like sweeping the dust in, and I think he was like amused by me because he was like smiling and looking at me, laughing a little bit. And then he took the garland that was on the picture of Bhaktisiddhanta, and he held up the garland to me, and he said, "Here, this is from Krishna with blessings." And it was just so intense. And when he saw the tears coming down, he said, "Well, isn't that all right?" And I was, yeah. Different things happened. One thing that happened, we only had the Bhagavad Gita, and it was the blue Bhagavad Gita. He said, read a chapter a day, and a new book had just come out, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. I really wanted to read the book. In fact, he saw me with Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He said, "Oh, you're reading Teachings of Lord Chaitanya?" He's smiling. But because I was a new devotee, I had so much to do that I didn't have enough time to read. So I thought, I'm going to go hide in the woods and read the book. I had a little blanket, my bead bag, and the book. It was just a beautiful day, and I'm walking down the path until I got to a stream. And I just started reading about Lord Chaitanya and the birds were chirping. It just felt like I was in Vaikuntha. And then I thought, well, maybe they're looking for me. I should go back. I'll take a shortcut back. So I start walking down the stream thinking that stream will lead to Keshigat, where that was where we used to bathe. And I'm walking, barefoot down the stream for a long time, and I don't recognize anything. And after a while, I think this is a different stream. Better go back. So I'm retracing my steps, and all of a sudden I hear guns going off, go-karts, men. And I thought, well, I'd better go up this hill and find the creek and keep going, because I didn't want them to see me. So to make a long story short, I never found the creek again. I'm walking for hours and hours and hours, and after a while, I don't even know if I'm going in the right direction. There's no houses. It's starting to get a little bit dark, and I'm listening to hear the sound of the cartels, but I never heard anything. So I go up on the highest hill I could see. There was no trees around. It's getting dark, and there's clouds, and there starts to rain and lightning and thunder. And I thought, well, I guess I'm supposed to lie down in the ditch because it's lightning. I'm lying in the ditch. Like, Krishna, please help me. It was funny because I didn't feel afraid the whole time. I really felt like Srila Prabhupada was with me. I was just chanting. And I felt this message to walk in a certain direction. So I got up, I started walking, and after a while there was a house with a fence around it, with a dog. And when the dog saw me, he started running, and there was a hole in the fence, and he ran out of the hole to attack me. I started going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. He turned and he ran back. And I was thinking, this mantra really works. This is incredible. And an old lady came out, and she invited me in. So I explained where I was from. She goes, oh, we know where that Vrindavana farm is. That's really far away. How'd you get way out here? It was raining. She says, you can stay overnight. We'll take you back the next day. Because I would still have to walk that 2-mile road up to the old farmhouse. So I thought that was okay, and I wasn't really worried. I just read some more teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and next morning they dropped me off. I'm walking up the path, really happy, thinking everyone would be glad to see me. So I start getting close to the farm, and I start yelling, Haribol, really loud. I hear Chintamani go, Haribol. I go, boy, here he comes, and he looks really mad. So he comes down, he's really mad. He's walking with me back. He says, where have you been? And I told him what happened. He's just shaking his head. He said, you had Srila Prabhupada so worried. He had to stop his translation. And I heard this from every devotee. He had to stop his translation because of you. We were out looking for you in the rain, and these men came up, and we thought you were kidnapped. And so he says, I'm going to go tell Srila Prabhupada you're back. And I said, I feel like Srila Prabhupada already knows that I'm back. And he said, of course he does, but he still wants us to tell him. So everyone I saw, Brahmananda and Gargamuni were visiting, everyone came up to me, do you know that Srila Prabhupada stopped his translation because of you? And that he said that you can send a 16-year-old boy around the world, but you can't send a woman across the street. And so by then I was afraid to see Srila Prabhupada. And I'm out washing my pots, been chastised by everybody in the community, and here comes Srila Prabhupada. I'm like, oh no. He looked at me, he said, so Chintamani, you had this whole place topsy-turvy last night. I'm sorry, Srila Prabhupada. He just smiled really big and said, it is all right. He was so kind. One time he was getting a massage outside, and then someone came, they started taking photographs of him, and he said, these photos are not for Back to Godhead magazine. And, they used to get his, the remnants from his plate, and just, brahmacharis would like run through the woods tackling each other. This new person had just got initiated, Taruni, was like, what are they doing? I said, those are Prabhupada's remnants. We had really big feasts, especially when Brahmananda would come from New York, big buckets of prasad outside, and it was really, really nice. Srila Prabhupada, he had so much compassion. Even he didn't really care what kind of body you had because he knew we weren't these bodies. So I got to put garlands on him sometime. I was always very keeping at a distance. I had so much awe for him. I just liked to watch everything he did, every word he said, hang on every move he made. One time I made a garland, and they were giving it to him, and he liked it. And he said, "Are you an artist?" And I didn't want to say the wrong thing. I was thinking what to say. Because I used to paint a little bit, but I wasn't really good, and I thought artist meant a compliment. And I said, "I don't know." He said, "What?" "I don't know." He said, "She says she doesn't know Srila Prabhupada." "Oh, okay." Let's see. So then Srila Prabhupada left New Vrindavana. It was sad. We all walked with him down the path. It was very quiet. And he'd been there, I'm not sure how long. It seemed like a really long time. And we'd gotten so used to being around him. And it was just really sad when he left, because that was really the time I got to have personal association. After that, when I saw him, there were so many devotees. It wasn't as intimate, and Srila Prabhupada was so kind. One time I remember at New Vrindavan, two devotees got in an argument, and then later on in the day they were making up, and they were hugging each other, and Srila Prabhupada saw them. He was very pleased. He said, "Yes." He said, "This is the mood to be in, the mood of embracing." So then what happened, so many devotees from Los Angeles were going and opening temples. And then what happened was Sudama, who I'd never talked to in my whole life, wanted to go to Japan. He had been Srila Prabhupada's servant. And years later I found out that Srila Prabhupada had said, "Whoever went to Japan, I'll personally come and take you back to Godhead at the time of death." So he wanted to go. And everyone was getting married and opening temples. So he came up to me one day and said, "Do you want to get married? I need a wife because I'm going to Japan to open a temple." And I said, "Ask Srila Prabhupada." So he ran off. And later he says, "Okay, we're getting married in a few days." So within a few months, I was initiated, married, and off to a foreign country. He had asked Srila Prabhupada about the language problem, because we didn't speak Japanese. We didn't know anyone over there. And Srila Prabhupada said, "If your house is on fire, you can somehow convey the message." So Bali Mardan and him went, it was like late summer. They went and found a place. As soon as they found a place, I flew over. And it's amazing because I didn't even think twice about it. Now I would question how we're going to make money, all these things. But Srila Prabhupada just empowered us to do things that were pretty amazing. He wanted a temple in Tokyo, so we went. And it was kind of austere, but we'd go in Harinam, and we got the books were printed at that time in Japan, Dainapan. So Srila Prabhupada came to Japan, and 2 times. The first time he came, he had just given the biggest sannyas initiation. There was Madhavisa, Kartikeya, who are? There was a few of them. Well, they all came with Srila Prabhupada. We had a very small temple. There was no place for me. I was the only woman. I was kind of out of place and sleeping out in the car. But complete bliss because Srila Prabhupada was there. I remember that Kirtananda said, "Oh, you can go get your Gayatri mantra." I didn't know what that was really, but I went to the apartment, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Sit here." And he showed me how to count on my fingers, and then he said, "Now you do it." And I did it right the first time, and Srila Prabhupada looked at Sudama and said, "Oh, she's very intelligent." And I didn't get as much association directly as the men, of course, but it was Janmashtami and Vyas Puja, and I got to cook for Srila Prabhupada. It was really nice because I heard he ate a lot, he liked it a lot. And then we had the infamous Vyas Puja, where Srila Prabhupada came and We didn't know how to perform the ceremony right. And the main problem was that none of the sannyasis went and asked him instructions. That's what he got upset about. He wanted pushpa. Sudama thought pushpana rice, cooking all this rice instead of flower offering. So right in the middle of Vyas Puja on his Vyasan, he gets up and he just leaves. And we were devastated. Everyone thought, we're finished. This is the end. He's gone. We're just talking like what to do, so upset. So then some men were talking to him later at his apartment, and the problem was that the leaders didn't come and ask him how to do the ceremony, and he said something about if the leaders didn't, do everything like bona fide and right, he said there was no hope for the rest of the society. So he's teaching an example, but he was so kind that he came the next day. We got to do Vyas Puja, and he was very happy. So that was a big relief. I remember he came 2 times to Japan. Now the second time he came, that was, I'm not going to say the date, 70 or something like that. The second time he came in 72, now we had moved to a big, kind of like farmhouse. We were having Sunday feasts. A lot of Japanese people were coming. When Srila Prabhupada came, there was a whole temple room full of Japanese people, and they came. Everyone offered him a flower. He said, these Japanese people are very nice. One thing that did happen was that I wasn't aware of. There was one couple that had moved to Japan, and the husband was beating the wife. I didn't know that, but Sudama knew that, didn't know what to do, and he went and asked Srila Prabhupada. He told Srila Prabhupada what was happening. And Sudama told me right after he talked to Srila Prabhupada that Srila Prabhupada said any man who beats his wife is a dog and that she should leave him. So this idea about beating the wife was not from Srila Prabhupada. What happened in Japan also was Sudama, probably from the first visit, seeing all the sannyasis, got the idea to take sannyas. He never mentioned it to me, but he went to Srila Prabhupada and asked Srila Prabhupada if he could take sannyas. I didn't know anything about it. So Srila Prabhupada said he had to get my permission. So he came out and said, I just asked Srila Prabhupada if I could take sannyas, and I need to get your permission. And I didn't really want to be married anyway, so I just thought for a minute. I said, yeah. I didn't exactly know what it meant, but I said, sure. I knew I wasn't supposed to see him again. That's about as much as I knew. It also meant I had to leave the temple. So then I had to go to Hong Kong because that was the nearest temple. Before I left, Srila Prabhupada gave me a flower and said goodbye, and we had these Jagannath deities on the altar. So I'd been the only one that had worshipped those deities. So those deities were going to go to Hong Kong. And I took them to Hong Kong. Oh, I just want to tell one other thing, too. The second time Srila Prabhupada came, I was starting to get kind of lack of association. It was becoming difficult. It was so austere. In the winter, it was so cold. We had one kerosene heater for a 2-story, thin Japanese apartment. It was so cold. The pipes would freeze sometimes. We would have no water. I'd have to go and get buckets of water to do dishes and make the feast. It was so cold, I had to put whatever I didn't want to freeze in the refrigerator at night. And I didn't even have a coat until my mother sent this person to check up on me because she was afraid what was happening to me. And someone bought me a coat. And I wore the coat all the time, inside. We had no shower. We had no washing machine. We had like an outhouse. It was very austere, but I don't remember complaining or anything. We'd go out every day. We'd have the Japanese back the Godheads. We'd go out, we'd sing. I even went out by myself sometime. And I'm a really shy person. I don't like, these people would get in a crowd around us, and they'd be watching us. We'd be chanting, and go selling magazines wasn't the kind of thing I would ordinarily do, but due to Srila Prabhupada, I was able to do that. And so by the time he came the second time, I was starting to get, it was kind of not as blissful. And when Srila Prabhupada, he came from the airport, there was a long, winding gravel road, and I was waiting outside, and as soon as he got out of the car, as soon as Srila Prabhupada saw me, I paid my obeisances. And he said, he was walking up, he says, Chintamani, Chintamani, thank you very much. And immediately I felt like I can stay here forever. It was just like everything was lifted off. He just had that effect. I'm remembering more things now. We also were chanting Sanskrit for the very first time. I'd never chanted Sanskrit. So in the morning class, there's all these sannyasis, brahmacharis, and then me. We're all in a circle around Srila Prabhupada. And I was really scared because they were going one by one chanting Sanskrit sloka. And when they came to me, I didn't say anything because I wanted them just to keep going. So it's completely silent. They're waiting for me. I'm like, please. Srila Prabhupada had his glasses down on his nose. Like he looks up at me. Next, he said, Chintamani, gold medal. And everyone started laughing because I couldn't say the Sanskrit right. He said, one time he said in this class, if you sweep this floor with your heart and soul, you can go back to Godhead. And I was the one sweeping the floor. I was thinking, okay. He also said, if you cry for Krishna, you're all right. And then also what happened was, I had brought little Radha Krishna deities. Tamal Krishna had given me, he was the president in La Cienega, to Japan. We didn't have them on the altar then, but Srila Prabhupada gave me instruction how to paint them, what colors and everything. And we didn't have a flute, so I wrapped some gold ribbon around the little stick. And Siddham was saying, that's not a flute. I showed it to Srila Prabhupada. He said, that could be a flute. That's okay. That'll work. Another time, Srila Prabhupada needed someone to draw a picture of a building, and I was the only one that had done any artwork, which wasn't very much. And so they gave me this project to draw this building, and quite honestly, I didn't know what I was doing, but I drew something. And I remember they gave it to Srila Prabhupada. He was just shaking his head, no. Just look at that, like shaking his head, no. He looked at me, he said, he said, that is all right. He said, you tried. That is all that matters. So what happened with the Jagannath deities, back to the Jagannath deities, all I remember, they came through the mail when I was in Japan, and I didn't know too much about deity worship. I saw deities in LA before coming to Japan, but all of a sudden we had Jagannath deities, and we're making offerings and making clothes, and I became very attached to them. So when I left, I was supposed to take these deities to Hong Kong because it was so cold in that big temple. Sudama had put them in a box and put these little Jagannaths on a heating pad, like on low temperature. I used to go look in the box sometimes, look at the other ones. And so when we got to Japan, Borjan Prabhu was he was going to saw off the garlands that were attached, and I was saying, you can't do that. You can't do that to Lord Jagannath. He said, you're too attached to them. You should keep them. So I ended up with those deities, and from there, I got a chance to go to the Philippines, help open that temple, and from there I went back to Los Angeles. I had the Jagannaths in this blue box. Srila Prabhupada was in Los Angeles, and people coming up to me like, you're in the Brahmachari ashram, you've got deities in a box? This isn't right. And they were everything to me. It was everything that I had. It was like, they're saying, you can't worship these deities. Srila Prabhupada said in a lecture, it's better to come to the temple, worship the deities in the temple. And it was the first time I really got up the courage, I'm going to ask Srila Prabhupada about this. So we used to get to go for darshan, and I took the box of Jagannath, and I went up the steps, and Srila Prabhupada was in the room. And I remember he gave me some sandesh and was asking me how it was in the Philippines. And then I got up the courage. I said, Srila Prabhupada, I have Lord Jagannath in this box, and I want them to see you. And I opened up the box and stood them up. And he just sat back. He was, oh, very nice. They're gorgeous. He said, so your husband's taken sannyas? I said, yes. Then you just make Lord Jagannath your husband, Subhadra your daughter, and Lord Balaram your son. He said, because every woman needs a husband, son, and daughter. I was happy with that arrangement. He said, take them wherever you go, inside or outside the temple. I was thinking, outside the temple? I'm never going to live outside the temple, but okay. And he said, to take care of them. A little later on in the discussion, I said, Srila Prabhupada, is there any chance of me going back to Godhead? And he said, I think I said in this lifetime. He said, maybe I just said back to Godhead. He said, you just do what I told you. You make Lord Jagannath your life and soul. He said, and you will become fully liberated, Krishna conscious, and go back to Godhead in this very lifetime. Then in the room came up Jayagopal and his wife, Jayagopal, who had been very involved in the movement and was living outside the movement, came up with his wife. And later his wife told me that she had been praying and praying to Srila Prabhupada that he would chant 16 rounds again. And we were sitting there, and Srila Prabhupada asked him, are you chanting 16 rounds? And he was like, no. Why not? He said, oh, maybe I'm lazy. And he said, you should chant 16 rounds. And Srila Prabhupada was very kind and encouraging, even though at that time so many devotees were like living outside the temple. And I remember afterwards, his wife was so happy that Srila Prabhupada had said that to him. And he shortly died after that in a car accident also. So then from there I went to New Vrindavan, and I was sent up to the old farm with Lord Jagannath on the altar. And when Srila Prabhupada visited in 1972, there was a big festival. And everyone went down, but I had to stay up because Sudama was there, and he wasn't supposed to see me. Like that would really make any difference. And I was going crazy because I wanted to see Srila Prabhupada. I had to stay up there by myself. I couldn't see my spiritual master. So I was very upset. So one day they made him stay back, and he was really upset. But I got to come down to the festival. Later, Srila Prabhupada, oh yeah. Well, actually, this goes back to Japan. Sudama, I don't know what he complained about me, but he wrote a letter complaining something about me to Srila Prabhupada. And the reason I know, because when we got a letter from Srila Prabhupada, he said, why do you complain about her? She can come and be with me in India. And I was like, oh good, I can be with Srila Prabhupada in India. Sudama never sent me to India. So I got this idea to go to India. So when I was in New Vrindavan, I wrote and asked Srila Prabhupada if I could come to India. This was around 73 or 74. And he said, yes, you should come as soon as possible. So it took me quite a few months to collect enough money to go to get a ticket. But I ended up going to India, and when I was in Calcutta, from then on, after Srila Prabhupada authorized the Lord Jagannath deities, wherever I went, they were on the altar. They've been on the altar in many, many temples. So they were on the altar in Calcutta, and then we got to visit Vrindavan during a festival. And I really, when I saw Vrindavan, I wanted to live there. But the devotee said, you can't come to Vrindavan because you have Lord Jagannath, and he can't go on the altar in Vrindavan. It's not the mood. And someone went and told Srila Prabhupada, and he said, she can come and live in Vrindavan and keep them in a room and offer tulsi, water, and flowers. Oh, excuse me, tulsi, water, and fruit. So he was always trying to satisfy the devotees in different ways. I ended up getting very sick. I almost dying in India, and they said, go try Bombay. Bombay's like the LA of India, and you'll get healthy. So I went to Bombay. This was while the temple was being built, the newer temple. And Lord Jagannath was on the altar there, and Halika came through, she was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And I was doing the Rajbhoga offering in the temple, and a lot of times she would come and get something I made and bring it to Srila Prabhupada. And I remember Srila Prabhupada, this was 1975, he was kind of sick. He wasn't eating very much. And I made him a huge piece of burfi. It had cashews on top, and it was about, it was quite a few inches big. And she brought it to Srila Prabhupada, and she told me that he said, "Oh, Chintamani is made," and he ate the whole piece of burfi. I was really happy when he did that. And in Bombay, we'd go for a walk sometimes on the beach with Srila Prabhupada, a big group of devotees. And he would talk, and I remember this one time, the subject was about women, women are Maya and all this stuff. And I just remember Srila Prabhupada stopping and saying, "But not devotee women." And all the women were like, "Yeah," really happy. And it's, Srila Prabhupada is very kind. I wouldn't be sitting here today if he wasn't the most patient spiritual master. A lot of us have had ups and downs and got off track, but there's no need to go anywhere else. I've really realized that Srila Prabhupada is a very confidential servant of Krishna, and who he is in the spiritual world, I don't know. That's very confidential. But he has the power to give Krishna to us if we follow his instructions. And he is an ocean of mercy, and anyone who leaves Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet thinking there's something higher, they don't understand Srila Prabhupada. And I beg forgiveness for all my offenses, and I hope to be Srila Prabhupada's servant eternally, and to become humble and serve the devotees. And anyone watching this, please forgive my offenses.